And welcome to today's program brought to you by the U.S. Botanic Garden. My name is Courtney Burris, the online education specialist with the Learning and Outreach team here at the Garden in Washington, D.C. We're so happy to have you joining us online this summer for this special Plants and Music programming series where we explore the realm of plant music and meet musicians, sound designers, inventors, and scientists who create and utilize innovative technologies to engage with plants in remarkable ways. Get ready for a truly unique and educational experience. Today's program, Connecting with Plant Music, Exploring the Science and Art of PlantWave, is a special online talk and Q&A presented by Joe Patitucci, artist and co-creator of the PlantWave device. This session will continue to orient us to the dynamic terrain of plant music through the exploration of the PlantWave device, a wildly popular tool in plant music technology. Joe Patitucci is an artist and the CEO and founder of Data Garden, the makers of PlantWave, a pioneering technology that turns the biodata of plants into music. With a background in both music and environmental advocacy, Joe has dedicated his career to bridging the gap between technology and nature, inspiring people worldwide to appreciate and conserve the natural world through the universal language of music. Joe is excited to share his journey and looks forward to connecting with plant lovers from around the globe. Welcome, Joe.
Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it. And thank you for the wonderful intro there. Um, well,
Absolutely.
it's great to have this opportunity to share plant music with such an amazing community. I love U.S. Botanical Garden. I've been there a few times, and it's just like such an amazing place. And we're so grateful that there are so many plant stewards out there, and that our country is preserving this heritage. So yeah, thanks everybody for being here. And it sounds like some of you know. I was trying to see what the results of those polls were. I'll just vote yes on both of these and see if it shows me that. Oh, okay, cool. So a lot of you have heard of plant music before, and some of you are also new to it. So it's about 60-40. Wow, cool. So yeah, today we're going to talk about plant music. We're going to talk about like how all of this works, right? A lot of people, when they first hear a plant making music, it's such a magical experience, and it can be so beneficial for us to actually have this tool that allows us to hear how active plants are through sound. And one of the first things that I think is important to note is that plants don't emit sounds that sound like celestial flutes and voices. We are using sound as a tool for monitoring the internal processes of plants. And this is a practice that's known as sonification. So I'm going to share my screen here. Share this one, and I'm going to share this one. Yes. Great. Yeah, so plant music it's a form of sonification, and sonification is a way of taking non-audible data and making it sound. So yeah, we're going to talk about sonification, how PlantWave started, how it works, what the data is that we're getting from plants, and then some of the fundamental principles around designing the instruments for plants to play. And then we're gonna listen. I have this ZZ here, and I have my PlantWave app and everything right here, so we can do some demos, and then we'll have some questions. But yeah, so sonification, like I said, is a way of taking non-audible data and representing it as sound. And it's been used by like NASA for helping us to communicate the wonders of the cosmos. It's used for a lot of different things, like geological surveys. It's used related to earthquakes. But if we start to think of what's the most basic version of sonification? You can think of something like a wind chime. So, a wind chime, it's not actually the wind singing necessarily. It is the chimes are being blown by the wind, and you can, by listening, tell relatively how much wind there is. Right? You won't know like the exact miles per hour of the wind, but you'll know if it's relatively more or less windy based on how many notes you're hearing from a wind chime. And then you'll also notice, like here at the top, wind chimes are often designed so that they kind of spin around while they're being blown, and that adds like this randomness uh, so that it's always kind of like hitting different notes. But if you wanted to use a wind chime to also clearly communicate what direction the wind is coming from, you would just make this top part like very fixed, and you would know like, oh, that note means the wind's coming from the north, and that note means it's coming from the south. So that's a way of representing non-audible data as sound in a very like mechanical version. Uh, then I'm going to show you something else. It's really fun. This guy, uh, Tobias Jack, he's like a TikTok star, and he sings graphs. So this is another form of sonification. So I'm gonna share this, and we're gonna listen to this graph, which is demonstrating the global temperature anomaly. Basically, you're gonna hear what a global warming graph sounds like over the last, I think, 100 years. So let's check that out. So, yeah, not necessarily the song you want to hear, but yeah, that's an example of someone singing a graph. So that is, you could just tell like he was following the graph with his tone, and that's basically what we're doing with PlantWave. We're following this graph that we're getting from the plant uh, with with sound, and we're representing that with different instruments. So we could represent it with voice, we could represent it with flutes, we could represent it with a lot of different things. But I really recommend checking out Tobias's channel. He sings graphs all the time, and it kind of helps with this literacy, I think, of sonification and understanding what it means to be able to represent data as sound. So another version of this is what NASA does with space sonification. So I did a panel at South by Southwest recently with an astrophysicist, and she's blind, and she communicated to me that it's something that I don't think a lot of us realize, but like astrophysicists aren't just like looking at the sky or looking through telescopes. They're largely looking at data. They're just like pouring through numbers and data, and using that to kind of make conclusions, or have a greater understanding of the universe. And what I also found out is images like this butterfly nebula are not actually photographs. These are visualizations of the data. So they're visualizations of light that we can't see, or these other things, these other data points, like as image, so that we could have an experience of it. But it's not an actual picture of the sky. So I thought that was really cool, because sonification, similarly, is not the sound of space in this case, but it is a sonic representation of the data from space. And this is used to allow like blind people to have an experience of this celestial connection to the universe. And not only that, but it's also a way of representing the data. So we're going to listen to this really quickly, uh, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. So let's check this out. So first, you'll hear these like little sparkly kind of sounds, and those little sparkly sounds are the points of light. They're like the little stars and stuff. And then you'll hear what sounds almost like violins or like stringed instruments, and those represent the gaseous part here. This this like kind of blue gas. And then the volume of all of these instruments is determined by how bright it is. So when you listen to this, you'll hear these like violins start to come in here, and they get louder here, and then they fade out. And as the gaseous part moves towards the upper part of the screen, the notes go up. So you'll hear the violins kind of swell and get really loud towards the center point, and then continue going up but fading out. And you'll also be able to maybe notice the little twinkle sounds along with these stars. And that's how this sonification works. So let's check this out. There you have it. That is the butterfly nebula represented as sound. Let me get out of this. Where did we go? Whoops. Great. View. Thanks for your patience. Yeah, so the butterfly nebula represented as sound is just another way of demonstrating sonification. And so sonification, again, it's a way of representing data as sound. And you might be wondering, like, how I got into this, like, why I'm doing this. And the answer is that I was, a musician. I was in bands and things, and I was always inspired by nature. I would always go out into nature, kind of connect to the feeling of a place, and make recordings of natural sounds, and then like bring those back into my little studio in Philadelphia back at the time with like toy instruments and like old stuff. And I would connect to that feeling of the place by listening to those sounds and then write music. And it's not even like I had the music. It's not even like I had the sounds that are being represented alongside the music. I was just kind of channeling the feeling of being in nature. So we all know what that feels like being out in the woods, and you just feel like a little bit more open. So I was kind of channeling that feeling of openness and making music. And then I started releasing the music. I started my company as a record label, Data Garden, and we released all the music. It was a zero waste record label. All of the music was released on these little album cards that had download codes on the back, and then you could plant the albums, and they would grow into flowers. So in this case, these were some blue lobelias. And then Data Garden started to do these. We really wanted to use this platform to connect people to nature, and we were also like really interested in the history of electronic music, and like and just people doing experiments with plants, and doing these experiments with electronics. And so we actually started to make these like installations and these different kinds of festivals and events for people to explore this intersection between plants, music, and technology, like how nature can influence us humans to make new forms of art. So this is an art installation where people are listening to like voices coming from trees. There were samples of different voices and things, and this was our first event, and we had like an outdoor concert, and different people like making cool art, which then led us to be invited to make an art installation at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And that's where it kind of became clear that this history of experimental music and experiments with plant biology that were being done in like the 70s that we were really inspired by could have uh, use today. So we actually ended up using like old circuitry from Radio Shack. If anybody remembers Radio Shack, it was like a store that had like all this like radio equipment and stuff. And we started to experiment with using a lie detector on plants. And there's a history to this because early plant consciousness experiments that were being done in like the 70s were done by this guy named Cleve Baxter. And he was an FBI polygraph expert. And what he found was that if he just like got an idea one day, he was like, "What happens if I connect the lie detector to a plant?" And what he saw was that he was able to get a wave from the plant similar to what you would get from a human. And he started to recognize that the plant seemed to respond to different like, stimuli in the room, different light or different people even walking into the room. And a lot of his experiments weren't able to be kind of replicated, but it was very clear that by using that tech in that way, you could see at least how a plant is responding to its environment. And it is a very active being. Like these aren't just things. You all know this, but they're very active participants in our lives. And so by hooking up this lie detector to a plant, we were able to kind of get this data and then translate that into sound. Uh, and then so yeah, here we are. It's my buddy over there bringing a plant to the Philadelphia Museum of Art. What we started to notice is that when people had this experience of listening to plants, they would instantly feel like more relaxed and connected and inspired. But they would also often do this thing where they would like hold their hand over it, or they would do these kind of movements of exploring energetic exchange with the plants, which I remember the first time I did this, there was a young girl. She was like 10 and her name was Melody. This is very trippy. I'm like, was she from another dimension? But she came in and she was just like, she just starts going like this to the plant. She turns to her mom and she says like, "Hey mom, all you have to do is think light coming through your hands and the plants will sing to you." And I thought that was the trippiest thing ever. I thought that was kind of crazy, but it actually starts to make a lot of sense when you start to think about plants and how they survive. Um, plants are basically processing light, and they're processing that to make food. So, human beings are able to see light, but we're only able to see, if you think of the visible light spectrum, a human being is only able to see a small amount of the visible light spectrum. So, and because if we were able to see more than that, it would just be confusing. It'd just be too much information. So every being is kind of tuned to different frequencies of attention, I guess. But yeah, so if a plant is able to eat light that we can see, why can't it eat light that we can't see? And examples of light that we can't see are like infrared, ultraviolet, you know, forms of heat. And then we also have language for this, right? If somebody walks into the room and they feel like a bright light, you know what that feels like, and that there's words for that. And so, yeah, that I thought was really cool, just to see how people have this intuitive connection to understanding that there is this exchange happening between ourselves and plants. So this is me experiencing it. I like this. This was a lot better than carrying instruments around touring in bands. I liked this more, just like laying on the floor and listening. And so this was very successful, and a lot of people were inviting us to produce these kinds of installations all over the world, and other artists wanted to be able to use the tools that we created. So we did like a Kickstarter in 2014 and started experimenting and making different prototypes that eventually resulted in this product, which was called MIDI Sprout, which is basically the same as PlantWave. It just has like less features. It was in a cardboard enclosure because again, we were committed to being zero waste. We've since upgraded, and PlantWave now has a fully recycled enclosure. It's not cardboard, but yeah, this was a cool like first product, and it was really designed for people like me and other people that make music with synthesizers to be able to listen or to make music with plants. And then fast forward, now we have PlantWave, and it doesn't require you to have like a whole synthesizer setup and have any knowledge of sound design to be able to enjoy it. So now it's something that you can just have at home. You can just plug it in and pair it to your phone. The phone has instruments on it that we've designed for plants to play. And those things are called sound sets. And I'm going to take you through a little bit behind the science of these and why we design things in this way. But yeah, these sound sets are all collections of instruments that all have different use cases that allow us to connect to plants in different ways. So maybe you want to have a very literal translation of what's happening in your plant in real time, and you want to just know exactly what's going on. And other times, maybe you just want to have some background music that's not going to be too disturbing, and it's always going to be relatively pleasant and relatively calming. Those would be two different design approaches to like creating one of these sound sets. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of um, what are the principles and approaches to data sonification. So if we're taking data from plants, like what are we going to do? Like how are we doing that? How does PlantWave work? What is the data stream that we're working with, and what are the principles behind designing this? This has been like the deepest exploration for me as an artist, and in making this available. And also, this is where having an understanding of how this works can allow a person to really appreciate the music even more deeply. So we'll go into this. I have a plant here, but yeah, like so PlantWave, it detects changes in impedance of a plant. That's really just like changes in the amount of connection between 2 points in the plant. So between this point here and this point here, there's connection that's going through the plant. There's an electrical connection, and we're measuring how much connection there is in like milliseconds, and we're graphing that over time as that changes. So you can think of that wave earlier. It's like, oh, it's this connected now. Now it's this connected. Now it's this connected. Now it's this connected. Now it's and that's you're graphing that as a wave, and we translate each of those like intervals into pitch, and then the pitch messages get sent to the app that has instruments on it. So, and then the result is a continuous stream of music. So it's very much like when we listen to Tobias sing the graph of climate change. It's a very similar process, except instead of it being a human voice singing it, it is it's different digital instruments that are representing it. So the data stream from a PlantWave, like it gets translated into MIDI, and MIDI is just a computer. It's a language for computers that communicate with like synthesizers and stuff like that. So we don't really have to get into that. But if you are a musician that has knowledge of MIDI and like interest in that, we have a lot more depth there on some tutorials and things that I know that I think we provided a document that you'll be able to check out. Yeah, so I won't get too much into that. But the result of the data stream from the PlantWave ends up looking like this wave. So this is what happens when you have the wave falling within a specific note range. So one of the things you can do, one of the things I do with PlantWave when I'm designing the sounds is I can limit the notes that a plant is allowed to play. I can say, okay, plant, you're giving me all this information. However, I want to make sure this is harmonious and in a key. So I am going to limit that to one key, and maybe I'll limit that to 1 octave or 2 octaves. So then at that point, it's only allowed to play maybe like 10 notes between here and here. And so if your plant, if the wave is falling between those 10 notes, then you're pretty set. Like you'll be able to listen to the wave as a very clear melody. And that's very much like when we listen to the climate graph. There are times that we might limit the data more than, like, the plant might be spitting out a lot of range, but we're limiting the data to only being able to be represented in this amount of range. In that case, what ends up happening is we have to wrap the data, and that ends up looking like this, which gets kind of crazy. So it's like, this is, the notes are descending and then they're ascending, and then this triangle here would actually be up here, but it gets folded under and goes here. So that can be a little bit more of a challenge to understand when you're listening, because you might hear this note and then this note and think, wow, the plant just dropped a ton, but it didn't necessarily drop. It was actually going up. But there are also other ways of determining when you're listening to see if that's happening or not, because if it were a big drop, there would also be other sound things that would happen. So we have other ways of making it clear if it was a drop versus whether it's just going up. But that's a little bit more advanced. But this is just giving you a little example of some of the challenges that we have to deal with when we're designing a system that allows us to interpret data through sound. So here we're going to go through some of the fundamental principles of design, which are there's value in harmony. We want to provide listeners with multiple levels of resolution. And then we want to differentiate the sounds based on those different levels of resolution. That's going to sound really complex. I promise you it's not as complex as it sounds there. And we don't have, and then there's control messages. That's a whole other thing. But really, one of the most important things here is the value of harmony. And a lot of times people hear plant music for the first time, and and it's mind-blowing, and they're like, why does it always sound harmonious? Are there ever plants that just like sound really scary? And things like that. Well, we always like put all of the data, we scale the data to a key, and it's specifically known as a pentatonic key. Pentatonic keys are they're used in a lot of Asian music, like traditional Asian music, African music. It's a very universal key. There's some really great video demonstrations of this by like Bobby McFerrin and other musicians, Jacob Collier, how this pentatonic key is something that's kind of innate to us. And the feature of the pentatonic key is that it never has notes that are adjacent. So it'll never have notes that could clash if they're played in a weird order. So why do we do that? I mean, the main reason is ergonomics. We want to make sure that the data is being represented in a way that's listenable and non-fatiguing. And that's important because plants aren't just going to be like making huge changes on command. Part of this practice of listening to plant music is this art of listening and this art of patience. So the more time you spend with a plant that's playing music, the more you're going to receive the benefits of hearing some of these bigger shifts that could take longer to happen. So we really want to make sure that it's something that people want to listen to for a long time, because it might not make a big shift for like 20 minutes or something like that. It might be just be kind of droning or doing other things. So that's an aspect of it. And then the other aspect is that the pentatonic key and this and like harmony, pentatonic scales and harmony, they help to enhance openness. They help to calm our nervous systems, and that helps us to be in a state of receiving more. So we're not like tight and wondering what's going to happen next if it's we're just able to chill and receive a lot more. So it puts us actually in a state where we're more able to receive the benefits. So this is really the kind of human centric aspect of the design. And next, fundamental principles of design is that we provide the listener with multiple levels of resolution of the data. That sounds super complex. I know. It's really just like, when we saw that guy singing the wave, he was singing that wave at a very high resolution of the data. You heard every single contour of that wave, right? Now, we oftentimes will have multiple different instruments playing at the same time, representing that data in different ways. So one instrument might represent every contour of that wave, whereas other instruments might only be allowed to play a note at specific intervals. So you'll only catch little pieces of that wave. And then we'll do that with different instruments. So we'll usually have like something like Tobias's voice was, a voice represents all the contours of that wave very well. Whereas maybe maybe the bass, you wouldn't want to have bass like represent every single piece of contour. You might just have that. It's only allowed to be triggered like a few times during that. So that's an example of how we provide the listener with multiple levels of resolution. It makes it a little bit more symphonic. And yeah, we have some sound sets that represent the wave exactly like singing that graph, and we have others that have lots of different sounds that are played at the same time. But everything is a real-time expression of the plant. There's nothing that's like pre-recorded or pre-programmed. Everything is like a real-time representation of it. So yeah, we use different sounds to represent those different sample rates. We'll get into that a lot more when we're listening. And then CC messages, I won't get into this too much, but I can tell you that we also have this cool feature where a plant can be given a collection of instruments, and it will only play some of those instruments when it's at a certain activity level. And then when it's at another activity level, it might play more. It might be able to unlock different instruments. So it's not uncommon for like, if you have a plant connected to PlantWave throughout the day, like maybe in the morning it's playing 4 different instruments all at the same time and it's like super active and you're like, oh, this is great. And then at night, like 11 p.m. or something, it's just playing one instrument and it's just droning. Like it can be very expressive throughout the day. And that's because we have this like activity level thing that we have set up with PlantWave. So yeah, that's the basics of that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we are going to now check out a plant here. So I have this ZZ and I have these 2 little clips connected to it. And I have a phone here, and the phone is right here. Let's try to have these both here in this spot. Great. Now, I'm gonna plug this in. Oh well, here, wait, what can I do here? All right, cool. I'm gonna plug the PlantWave in, and you're gonna be able to see the wave, just like we saw when Tobias was singing. But this is gonna be the wave from the plant. I'm gonna make sure that you can hear this. That's on. That's on. Great. All right. So I'll even have our PlantWave here. You can't really see the PlantWave, but yeah, here we go. I'm gonna plug this in, and you'll be able to hear the music. Let's check it out. This is very similar to when Tobias was singing. Then every different part of the plant, it's not just about, it's not like one plant will have a specific pattern and you can tell like a mango tree from an apple tree or anything like that, but each leaf really has a different pattern. So they'll each have like different patterns of connections, so we can explore like the connection between this one and this. See, there's less connection between these two. They're kind of far, but if I touch both, let's see, that was actually my hand. Yeah, so you can see even within the same plant, I'll just wipe off just in case there's any dust here. Even within the same plant, you'll have different signals depending on what leaf you're connected to and how close they are. So this is an example of a very literal translation from the plant. We have these other sound sets. This one called Celestial Being. This one is going to have, oh yeah, and then if you go into, there's like a little learn more section there. If you tap that, it tells you, you know, what the instruments are, what to listen for, what some of the use cases are, and things like that. So we'll go to, oh wow, it kind of stopped. We going? We happy? We back? It's just a quiet plant. It's cool. So I'm going to go to this one called Celestial Being, And this one has multiple instruments all playing at the same time, where there's like an electric piano that you'll hear that follows the wave very literally, similar to like what was happening in that last one. But then there's other instruments like bass and other things. So this is just it's just not it's just this is a quiet part of the plant over here. Let's see what else we got going on. Every plant is kind of just going to be doing its own thing on its own time scale. They are not here to perform for us. They are here to teach us to be patient and listen and be with them. So in this one, the kind of beepy high sounds, so like those are representing the shifts in the plant in real time. Like very literally. And then there's some other sounds almost like synthesizer. And those synthesizer sounds are only allowed to be triggered once every few seconds, and they layer on top of it. So that ends up sounding like chords. And then there's bass too, that's only allowed to be triggered like once every 10 seconds. So there's nothing pre-recorded in there. Sometimes people hear this and they're like, oh, I would love to hear the plant without hearing all the extra instruments, without like the pre-recorded stuff in the background. And the fact is, there's nothing in the background. This is all real time. So that's an example of a sound set that represents this in multiple ways at once. Like it does it very literally, very real time, and then it has other aspects that are a little bit more delayed or a little bit less like a lower resolution, I guess. Then we have other sound sets that are just like mostly low resolution. So there's not a ton of real-time follow the wave. It's more like things are only triggered every few seconds. And that allows us to just have like very spacious background music, maybe for meditation and things. So there's another one here called Heart Chakra. So I say learn more about Heart Chakra. So this one's tuned to 520 hertz. It's not, we're not listening to it yet. So 528 is known by many as the love frequency. So it's designed to hold space for practicing gratitude and for our bodies and for heart chakra. Not sure if you can hear that very well. Let me turn this up a bit. This one's called Emerald Journey. This one's like it's kind of nice, chill.
Oh, it's so chill. We have a nice chill day in DC. It's this summer, so this is like perfect.
Great. So I just got that going on. The PlantWave's still happening here.
Yeah.
And now we can open it up to questions. Look at me, I'm like hiding in the forest.
I know.
It's great.
Well, yeah, this our chat has been very active, and shout out to Johanna because she's been engaging with us in the chat. It's been incredible.
Amazing.
Yeah, and so I think we have some questions here that we can ask directly that Johanna hasn't directly tackled, and I mean, let's talk about the parts of the same plant, right? Like we're noticing that the nodes go specifically on the leaf. that? Not the stem, not the why the leaf?
Yeah, the leaf, because so as plants are photosynthesizing, they're moving water around,
Yeah.
and that action is happening in like in the green part of the plant, in the leaf. A part of it as well is about that's where we can get the best connection to
Mm-hmm.
the plant, the
Mm-hmm.
most stable connection. So for instance, if you were to take like the sticky electrodes or something and put them on bark of a
Yeah.
tree,
Yeah.
like that's cool, but mostly what you're going to hear is data generated from the sticky pads falling off.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's like, I don't
Fireworks.
know how that just happened.
Yeah, we must have really liked your answer.
So it's just like my answer. Cool. Yeah. Uh, so
Yeah.
yeah, that's just like that. So it's, I think, a fundamental part of how this works is that there's
Hmm.
a very stable connection between the sensors and the plant. And
Okay.
one of the most stable places you could put it is the leaf.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, thank you for bringing up photosynthesis because that is where a lot of activity
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely. Because some folks were wondering, like, are we reading the electrodes? Are we reading the water? And you kind of answered it earlier, but just so we can have a full understanding what
Mhm.
is being read here.
Yeah, it is. The change in conductivity is related to how much water there is between 2 points. And
Okay.
so, as a plant is photosynthesizing or metabolizing, it's moving water around, it's moving nutrients around.
Okay.
So it's basically taking snapshots like every 10 milliseconds. It's taking like whatever 10 snapshots every second, I think,
Okay.
or maybe 100 snapshots a second. It's one of those. I'm blanking on that right now, but it's basically like how much connection is there between these 2 points now, and then it's like
Uh,
cool, and then 10 milliseconds later, it's like how much connection is there now, and so the change between then and now,
mm,
if the change is up, the note goes up. If the change is down, the note goes down. If the change goes way up, the note goes way up. If the change goes way down, the note goes way down. So the amount of connection between the 2 points is represented in real time as note messages. And so that's why
ah,
you hear. And so if a plant isn't doing anything or is less active, it'll just play one note kind of over and over again. It'll just drone
mm.
on a single note.
Does that have anything to do with its health? The health of the plant?
It can. I have a funny story about that because
Okay.
so the PlantWave app allows you to listen to broadcasts
Uh-huh.
of
Oh, wait a
people.
minute, Joe. We're getting in the chat that we want to turn down the music a little bit because we're,
Oh, more? Oh, cool.
yeah, I think we're still,
Is it off now?
it's still a little, we can hear it in the
You can still
background.
hear it?
How's that, folks? Is it any better? Yeah, the chat. Okay. They're telling us it's
That's
great.
better.
You
That's
go.
better.
Okay.
Okay, cool,
All
cool,
right.
cool. Yeah, because I think I turned it all the way off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the PlantWave app, you can actually like broadcast your plant. So I
Okay.
used to. I remember traveling. I was traveling in like Thailand, and my plant in Philadelphia at the time was being cared for by my roommate, and I remember tuning in from Thailand and just being like, "Huh, why is the plant just droning on one note?" And I realized, oh wait, no, it's like 3 a.m. in Philly. So okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like, but
Okay.
then like the next day, I checked in at night in Thailand, and I was like, wait, it's the middle of the day. Like, why is
Uh-huh.
that plant still droning on one note?
Uh-huh.
And it was still, and so I reached out to my roommate. I'm like, hey man, like, how are the plants doing? Like, I'm listening to this one, it's just kind of droning, and he's like, oh, they're doing great. Like, they're all great. And he took a photo, and so the plant that was hooked up to the PlantWave was a peace lily. And so he was watering the peace lily on like the same schedule as the snake plants. So
Oh,
when he sent me the photo, if you know peace lilies, they need a lot of water. So
not a
peace
water.
lilies are usually like
Snake plants are
like
like
this.
Yeah, you can leave them on their own. They're okay
Y-
for a while. But
yeah,
with lilies, yeah.
yeah. He sent me the photo, and the plant was just like, I mean, it was still alive. It's like he learned the lesson of like the difference between survival and thrival
There
from
we
that.
go. There
And
we go.
yeah, and it was like the only reason I knew that my plants weren't being taken
Wow.
care of well was because I was able to listen to it from Thailand and
Wow.
records. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, what a moment. You were like, oh my God, I'm sure that would have been. So what other like surprising have like plant contributions? That is because that was one of our questions. Like, have you ever been surprised by a plant's contribution? And it sounds like that is a story of wow, they can kind of like this sound, the device and the sound kind of let you know the health of the plant to a degree, right? Were there any other findings so far, even if science didn't say it, but maybe
Yeah, sure. No, there are lots of really interesting experiences I've had with plants. So I used to lead meditation and breath work with plants in Los Angeles, and I still do, like from time to time. But I would lead breath work, and oftentimes when there is, it can be like a kind of cathartic experience at sometimes, and when that energy would really pick up, a lot of times the plant would really pick up. And then, during Shavasana, when we're more in a restful space, the plant could often, chill out a little more. I've experienced people meditating with plants where they're like, "Oh, I'll just focus on my third eye," and then you just get the plant just like stops. I've experienced this many times where when people are in a very like meditative state, focusing on a plant that's
yeah.
playing music, it will just become silent,
Wow.
which would mean, I guess, either the plant is like stops metabolizing or moving stuff around at some point, or is maybe just at such a constant rate that it wouldn't produce any more novelty, any more notes.
Yeah. Does it have
Yeah.
anything to do with us as like conductors of electricity too?
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, it's like I don't know the mechanics of what's happening there. It could be a
Yeah.
lot of things, but it could be like that idea of, plants eating light that we can't see, that we're
Yeah.
giving off.
Yeah,
So
I
I
think that's
don't
what
do
makes this is so compelling, right? Because we're on like the cusp of something kind of new and great, and everybody's kind of checking it out. And you said something so important, that you said that plants are not here to perform for us, right? They're
Yeah,
here
totally.
to be patient and to kind of walk our journey with the world around us versus, what we tend to do is we like to manipulate the things, right? Human stuff. But I love that thought, right? Because it keeps us grounded in a way that I think some people are a little afraid of, right? Some people are afraid that this sort of technology is going to pull us further from nature, whereas you in your work is showing us this can actually bring us closer. Um,
Yeah.
since you've started, like how has your connections to plants changed?
Oh,
I know you can
well,
write a book at this point, but
yeah, no, it's great. I mean, for me, what it opened me to was to see how active plants are, and it also just like allowed me to see how I am walking through like a universe just like filled with life and activity, and that there's so many. I think I had like super profound experiences
yeah,
meditating and doing breath work with plants that opened me up to this idea of, the earth, the earth holding us in this really beautiful way, and seeing myself less as like separate from earth and separate from nature, and
yeah,
more as an expression of nature. Because it's been it's actually quite a new concept, this idea of like new on a like a human history
hmm hmm
kind of way, that
yeah,
this this idea that humans are separate from nature.
Mm,
That's kind of a new idea. I mean, it's like wearing shoes that are not natural fibers or that aren't made of something that's natural.
mhm.
That's a very
A new
new
idea. Yeah.
thing. And so we're separating ourselves electrically from the earth for kind of like
Mhm,
the first time in our
mhm,
existence as
mhm.
humans. And then consciously we think that we're separate, but it's like we're made of earth stuff.
There we go.
We've evolved like with bare feet on this planet. You cannot escape. Like you can
Yeah,
jump and you'll be disconnected from the earth for like a second,
yeah.
maybe two, if you're really good at jumping. um but we're just like a part of this greater being, and it's allowed me to kind of relax into that and feel way more supported by the earth,
Mhm.
and then allow like being in that, like coming to like living life from that place, I think just allows me to receive more wisdom,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
lack of a better term. Yeah.
It's totally like a mutual benefit, right? Like that's
Mm-hmm.
something that the USBG, one of the things that I really love about being there and being involved in our programming is that that's the whole goal, right? Is to kind of show this mutual benefit of plants and people who may not even have known that they're plant people, right? They might say,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a musician. How am I a plant person? Right? They might say, I'm an engineer. How am I a plant person? And
Mm-hmm.
here we are. Here we
Yeah.
are at this beautiful hybrid place where these very important roles, these very important lanes come and they intersect in such a beautiful way. And so I just really thank you on behalf of the United States Botanic Garden. I really thank you for being here and sharing this research, this gift, this delight. We need it. We need it. We need more of folks just going for the things that they're curious about and playing around with these intersections. Uh, it's been incredible. Thank you, Joe.